Good evening. It's 7:03. We'll open this meeting. All the selectmen are present. We'll start with the transmitted treasury warrants 52, 52A, 53, 53A, 54, 1, 2, and 2A.
Move the warrants is read by the chairman.
Second.
Motion made second. All in favor? Unanimous? We have no minutes to approve, so we'll start right with our 7 o'clock appointment. Joseph T. Keys, Esquire, Larkin and Keys, P.C., on behalf of Olviera Enterprises, Inc., doing business as Focaccia Restaurant. It's a public hearing to request a transfer of all alcohol license to Focaccia, Inc., DBA Focaccia Restaurant, to Olviera Enterprises, Inc., DBA Focaccia Restaurant, for property located at 2 Lowell Street. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Joseph Keys. I'm an attorney in North Reading, and I represent Olviera Enterprises. Essentially, we're just looking to transfer the liquor license over from Focaccia, Inc., who is the current owner of the property. Not planning any changes to the property whatsoever. It's still going to be the same restaurant, still going to have the same services, still going to have the same business plan. The president, treasurer, secretary of the company is Disney Olviera. He's the current head cook. How would you describe him as head cook? He's been basically running the business for the upwards of the last 11 years, and has no plans to change anything. All of the managers of the corporation that run the business on a day-to-day basis have all of their alcohol schooling. All of that stuff is up to speed and in place. And like I said, everything. The plan here is to keep everything the same. As far as I know, my client has told me that there hasn't been any complaints or concerns with the restaurant or anything else regarding the liquor license. So, briefly put, that's what we're looking for, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Do we have the green copies of the...
Yes. The returns.
Thank you.
Do you need these also as well? Okay. And here are all my receipts that we sent them. I don't know if you need that or not.
I don't.
Okay.
You might need those.
Again?
You might need those to...
I have to account for those.
That's right. Any recommendations from...
We had favorable recommendations based upon the review of the police department. They recommend approval, as well as the Board of Health and the Inspector of Buildings, indicating that there are no outstanding issues in either event.
Okay, any questions, comments, or a motion from the board?
Anything from the audience?
Is there anybody here wants to speak on this in the audience? No?
With that then, Mr. Chairman, I would move to grant the request.
I'll second it. Motion made and seconded. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. What needs to sign this license?
Okay.
One signature, right?
We'll go right into communications.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to provide you with information relative to the fiscal year 2012 local aid and state assessments as they affect the town of Wilmington, and I provided you with the notice that goes to the town of both of the estimated charges as well as the estimated receipts. If you would take the receipts section fiscal year 2012, the bottom line is $12,548,230, as well as the spreadsheet that has been provided to you, which is entitled Local Aid. You can see where the town has been based through fiscal year 2009 all the way to the final number. And as you know, we're really at the same number that you saw thereabouts in the House and Senate and the governor's proposal. The difference from the original proposal of the governor is a slight reduction. It's a slight increase over the House proposal, and it is a very, very slight increase from the conference committee. so that the total in local aid would be $12,548,230. The key numbers, of course, are the Chapter 70, which is $10,186,000, and the unrestricted general government aid of $1,951,000. The one change that you're seeing from last year is that the police career incentive, known as the Quinn bill, has been zeroed out. It was not funded at all this year in terms of the state's share. Last year there was minimal funding in the amount of $16,474, which was about 8.8% of what the town would have expected had the full share been funded. This year, that number is zero. In terms of state assessments, again, nothing remarkable, no major changes to speak of, so there's really no difficulty. The one interesting notation I would make with regard to local aid is, as you can see, Chapter 70 was essentially held harmless. That's the education aid. And in fact, the town is receiving about $55,000 more than last year with regard to Chapter 70. Where the town is seeing a reduction is in the unrestricted general government aid from $2,103,000 to $1,951,000. Now, one of the things that the governor has talked about is a one-time only payment of the $65 million statewide to bring back the unrestricted general government aid to the level it was in 2011. They are talking about providing those funds to the towns and the cities by October. This is something really brand new. It's not something that they typically do, where they suggest that there's going to be additional local aid on the cherry sheet. For some reason they're deciding to do it that way. I think they're going to wait and make a determination based upon how state revenues are coming in. I would suspect that's the reason. And if they come in the way that they expect that they will, then they will distribute those funds. And in terms of Wilmington, that would mean an additional $152,000. In terms of our own budget, we estimated that total receipts from local aid would be $11,968,000. Instead, they are coming in at $12,548,000. That is the way we've done business here. We've been very conservative in our estimates, and if in fact this is the case, then that certainly will help us down the road in terms of free cash and in terms of supporting any long-term debt associated with any project, the high school or any other. So if anybody has any questions regarding the local aid, I would be happy to respond. I also wanted to indicate what you already know, that one of the key provisions, in addition to the likelihood of the town receiving a portion of that $65 million from unrestricted general government aid, was the passage of the Municipal Health Insurance Reform Act. And we are still waiting now for the regulations to come out. The town does not need to take any action at this point in time. We have to wait to see finalized regulations. There are a series of seminars that are going to be held on municipal insurance reform, and we'll really wait at this point to see what comes of it. It was watered down a little bit at the end. As you know, the governor did veto several provisions and made some changes that were less restrictive than what initially came out of the legislature, specifically the House. but we will be taking a look at that and reporting back to the Board of Selectmen to determine whether or not we would be recommending any changes relative to the health care plans. If you look at the memorandum that I provided to you from Senator Tarr, he essentially outlines those 4 provisions that the governor added, and the changes included the extension of the moratorium on any health care premium cost-sharing changes that would impact municipal retirees. Under the governor's plan, the earliest retirees will see any changes to their health care premiums would be July 1st, 2014. Retirees in the town pay a similar premium right now in Wilmington as they would if they were employees. Another change was the requirement that any city or town interested in joining the GIC must identify a minimum projected savings of 5% on their health care cost in the first year compared to what they would be spending if they did not join the GIC. Also a change in the way municipal employees will share in the cost savings generated by health care reform, with the employees' share calculated based on the total aggregate health care cost savings rather than just the employer's share of the cost savings, and a redefinition of the plan design changes to include not only co-payments and deductibles, but also other cost-sharing plan design changes. So we'll be looking at this and reporting back to the board. At a recent meeting, the board reviewed legislation known as House Bill 3438, which is commonly referred to as the Public Lands Preservation Act. It's an act protecting the natural resources of the Commonwealth. The board indicated their opposition, similar to the MMA, to what is clearly an overly restrictive use on the way a town can use municipal land. The legislation goes far beyond the already strong constitutional standard, and in the MMA's opinion, and an opinion the board adopted, undermines local decision-making authority regarding municipally owned land by the imposition of severe restrictions on communities. Per your direction, I contacted the members of the legislative delegation, advised them of the board's opposition, and asked them to provide us with their opinion and their position, I should say, on the legislation as well as the status. We received a letter which you have from State Senator Bruce Tarr, who responds that House Bill 3438 was reported favorably by the Joint Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture on May 12th, and the bill was later referred to the House Committee on Ways and Means, where it is still pending. I'm quoting Senator Tarr now. You also had inquired about my position on this particular bill. Generally speaking, I tend to look favorably on any legislation that seeks to protect our precious natural resources. I'm currently reviewing House Bill 3438 closely to determine whether the existing language can achieve this worthy goal without placing an undue burden on municipalities. He writes that he's interested in knowing the board's specific concerns about the bill and any suggestions that the members may have for amending the bill. I would be happy to respond on behalf of the board, unless it's the board's intention to respond, but and to indicate to him really the undue burden it places on communities that would want to transfer land, Chapter 97 land. It's already very difficult to do that. Requires a unanimous consent of the Conservation Commission and a 2/3 vote of town meeting and the legislature. And it's my understanding that the board agrees that to do anything more than that really would place a burden. So, and I can just tell you, I'm sure the board wants to have discussion on this, but I also was advised by Representative Murphy, who contacted me on July 8th. He indicated that he is in agreement with the Board of Selectmen's opposition to the above referenced legislation. He indicated the bill was currently on hold. However, he said there appeared to be some positive movement as of late, and that Representative Murphy would keep the town apprised of the bill's progress. Today we also received a letter from Representative Maselli, who indicated that he would vote against the legislation. He believes the legislation places an unnecessary burden on the communities. Advises us that the bill is, as we know now, currently in House Ways and Means. And he writes that I am not in favor of adding a further burden on the towns in my district, but he does note that there is pressure mounting to discharge this bill in order to take a vote on it. So I'll take any direction from the board.
Yeah, but, the point that I think I've made in the past about this, but I think is worth restating, is that, the expression when something is hard to do is an old expression, take an act of Congress. And frankly, the way the law exists right now is harder than getting an act of Congress. I mean, you have to get a unanimous vote of the local Concom, 2/3 vote of town meeting, 2/3 of the legislature, and the legislature gets input from the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. And the proposed act, when I read Senator Tarr's letter, I pulled up the proposed act to try and answer his question. And the bill that's on the table, I can't imagine that you could amend it in any way that would make it palatable. I mean, the whole purpose of the law is to make it literally impossible to undo that designation without replacing the land that you're looking to get. So if a town had 50 acres of Article 97 land and wanted to somehow change the use of that land, you'd have to go out and buy another 50 acres to replace it. I mean, it's a ridiculous burden on towns. And in terms of the purpose of the current legislation, to me, I'm curious whether or not the proponents of this have had some example, some case that didn't work out the way they wanted, and this is a knee-jerk reaction to it, or if this is kind of there's no impetus other than increasing the control over municipally owned land. But I mean, whatever the purpose is, I just don't see it. I know in this town it's not like we've sent anything to the legislature trying to undo Article 97 land. So, I mean, I just can't. I would speak in the strongest terms in opposition to this, and I don't have any recommendations for the senator in terms of amendments. The only thing to me that's attractive about the proposed bill is the name, Public Lands Preservation Act. Other than that, it's no good for the town.
Thank you. Ben?
Yeah, I tend to agree, Mike. I think they name it strategically to make it difficult to oppose it. Because if I'm opposed to this bill, does that mean I'm opposed to the protection of public lands? That obviously that's not ipso facto the case. We all believe, I shouldn't speak for you, but I certainly believe that there's appropriate protection for public land necessary, and that policy and that practice is already in place. I was challenged by Senator Tarr's letter in his asking for suggestions as to how to revise or enhance or otherwise edit this proposed bill. And frankly, my inclination was there is no revision or edit that I could suggest. I did the same. I tried to read through it, and it's whereas and a lot of that kind of stuff, but the language of it seemed to me basically to be unnecessary and frankly untrusting of municipal government. I think effectively that's what we and the boards that are present and our town meeting is in place to do, is to act on behalf of our own community, and I don't think we need in this particular case the state to hold our hands or to tie our hands in this regard. So I think the Mass Municipal Association has a decent statement of why this is an unnecessary bill. and we might be able to leverage or borrow some of their language in articulating a letter back to Senator Tarr in hopes of getting him to agree with us. That's my position on this.
Judy?
I think everything's been said. I do agree with my colleagues. I don't have any edits to propose, and I do agree with what has been said. Thank you.
I do too. We could draft up some kind of...
Well, I'll draft a letter to Senator Tarr on behalf of the board, and I'll also send a note of appreciation to the Representative Murphy and Representative Maselli.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Carr, you were going through things and you kind of went from one to the next, and I wasn't sure if you were going to pause. So I did have a question. If we could revert back just a moment, and I'll let you finish your note there. But I'm going back to local aid.
Okay.
And I just tried to understand what these line items represent, and specifically under education. Estimate for charter tuition reimbursement was $19,600 and is now $7,800. So that represents a fairly substantial actual decrease. I had also circled the police career incentive, which was to zero, and I'm glad you raised that to everyone's awareness. But could you define for me what that significant drop at the charter tuition reimbursement represents? And
It's based upon what children from Wilmington are actually going into a charter school, so it's really formulaic, and we end up getting that. The state gets that, Department of Revenue gets that from the Department of Education, and it's the charge is, or the fee is based upon what the number of students that are in a charter school.
the actual number.
The
So we
actual.
carried, for budgetary purposes, we carried 2011 over to the estimate for 12.
Right, because we have no way of
I see.
knowing, so that's what we do.
Okay. Thank you, I think, for that. I think I had one more, if you bear with me for just a moment.
Sure.
No, you may have covered everything. Oh, yeah, and on municipal health care reform, which was the next, you transitioned right to that. And I recognize and I appreciate that you and Mr. Hall and others in Town Hall will crunch the numbers and see what effect the new law will have on us at our level in Wilmington. But is it safe to say, and I don't want to necessarily hold your hands here or tie your hands to a commitment, but to me, my knee-jerk reaction to this was very positive. And perhaps, you could read specific line items or maybe aspects of the law that finally came out and was signed that maybe were weakened through the process. But at the end of the day, the local government, Wilmington, and our fellow municipalities around the state of Massachusetts are in a stronger position to be able to be competitive in the marketplace with regards to offering health insurance at a fair price, maintaining jobs, maintaining fairness to the rest of the employees. It's a positive. I wasn't sure I was 100% sure you had the vibe that this was going to be a positive for the town of Wilmington. And through this process, I felt like we were moving in a direction that would end up being a positive for the town. So,
Well, I think it moved forward, but I guess my position is similar to that of Representative Lombardo, I think, from Billerica, who noted that it was watered down.
Yeah.
And that, again, we're going to have to see the regulations when they come out, but I want to understand what they mean by sharing in cost savings, for example. It's a step in the right direction, but I think it could have been a much more meaningful piece of legislation. The real goal, I think, would have been to simply eliminate, health insurance as a collective bargaining component of collective bargaining, similar to the way they do it at the state level. recognizing that that was not going to happen. I think the House version was a stronger version for communities, and I think it got watered down again. We can come back with some specific recommendations, and we'll advise the board how it affects the town and what the best reach is. I would say this, that I think we can certainly use it to our advantage in terms of negotiations, without being specific about those negotiations.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. Anxious to see some of the actual numbers. So thank you very much for keeping us apprised of it.
The board has a copy of a letter that was sent to me from Kathleen Black Reynolds, Esquire, an attorney with Perkins and Reynolds, regarding Adopt an Island program. She is writing to both myself and the Board of Selectmen to suggest that the town consider implementing an Adopt an Island program. She indicates that there are communities that have such a program where local businesses provide landscaping for the traffic and other islands in their community. The program is administered by the town, and individual businesses would have a sign denoted at the particular location. I think you've seen this in other communities. You've seen the state do it. Their signs pretty much overwhelm and mar the landscaping as far as I'm concerned. You can see that one coming off 93. It is important to note, and I've talked to Dawn Onesite about this, we have a number of traffic islands that are already taken care of by folks outside of the town. Most of the landscaping obviously is done by the town, but there are a number of companies, most notably Garrick Santo Landscape, which does the great job on the large island in front of the town common, and they do so without the name being put on there, because that's always been the town's policy, to accept volunteers who are willing to do something like that. I can note that Joe Langoni, I want to talk about a large island, the island that came about as a result of the Lowell Street project, which is in front of the Square One Mall. Did I say that right? Square One Mall, right? Northeast Development maintains that entire area, which is really state land, and through an agreement that we arranged with the state, knowing that they would not be maintaining it otherwise. That's maintained by them. Collings Tree Service maintains a number of different areas. The Wilmington Garden Club maintains a number of different islands. So all of these volunteers are doing this right now without the benefit of putting down any sign. But if the board is looking for this type of program, I'd be happy to discuss it with Mr. Onesite and come back with a recommendation, or even further discuss it with Attorney Reynolds to see which areas that she seems to believe that there's a need. Problem. I'm not for adding more bureaucracy if we're doing it now, but I'd be happy to look into it and see if there's a way to improve it.
Sure. Questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I mean, I had mentioned a few meetings ago the island over near the town common, because I had pointed out that over the years, well-intended volunteers sometimes do a great job, and sometimes maybe it's a little bit more than they had anticipated, and the town takes a lot of pride in maintaining its properties, and the parks and grounds and highway department, etc. So, I conceptually welcome the input of volunteers, but sometimes it's probably the way it ought to just be left. In terms of any recommendations where we could improve, if you could line up private or state money or whatever you can do to make the MBTA maintenance facility look any better. I'd be far more interested in having private enterprise make that place look good than any number of smaller islands in town. So I think continuing to have discussions through the manager with the DPW and Ms. Reynolds and any interested companies or individuals who want to volunteer is great. Keep doing that, and if you could get back to us. But other than that, I don't see the need to take any vote on it tonight.
Got anything, Mike?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Sounds good.
I would agree with that.
I'm not opposed to this notion. If there were a way, I mean, I don't know, Mr. Carey, you kind of mentioned on the outset of the discussion that some of the state properties are marred or whatever the word was, I forget, but, and I agree, everything has to be, discreet and professional and complimentary of the spot in question. I wonder if, is there a revenue stream that can be created from such a thing? It's like, I think of hypothetically, banner advertising at a baseball field, or putting a logo on a scoreboard, or things of that ilk, where it's advertising, and advertising isn't free, nor should it be, frankly. So if someone's going to get recognition for having taken care of or sort of sponsoring an island, is it just, does the town receive their care of that island, and in exchange for they get to put their logo on it, or is there some compensation that the town can receive from that? Hypothetically, I'm just wondering if that program exists, if it's worthwhile. Am I barking up the wrong tree?
I'm not aware of the exchange of an island as a revenue producer, but certainly the town has in fact received scoreboards and other such in-kind donations where somebody has paid for it, and you'll see a logo on it. I don't believe the town has ever sold space. I guess that would be a policy decision that the Board of Selectmen could make if they'd like. But you'll see from the scoreboard that was donated at the Little League Park or donated at the baseball field or any of the other fields in town, you might see the logo of either an organization or a company that purchased that.
Right.
They're not paying any advertising.
I don't want to get too far off on a tangent on this. We're talking about this particular issue with regards to the Adopt an Island program, and with regards to that specifically, I echo my colleagues and what Mr. Newhouse said. But since we're kind of just talking about it now, I have an occasion, as we all probably do, to drive down Route 38 through Woburn on my way to the rotary that gets you onto 128. And just before you get, I'm trying to think exactly where it is, but there's a Dunkin' Donuts across the street, and there's a baseball field on the left side. There's a church in that area as well. The baseball field, in the outfield, I think it's a Little League field, it has banners in the outfield for local businesses. I have no idea how this program works, who administers it, how much it costs to have your banner there, etc. But it struck me as I saw it, and as I guess a government official, I wonder how or if Wilmington could apply that kind of a program to offset costs associated with maintaining a particular field, a set of fields, if it were done in a professional manner, and we could dictate what the rules are associated with what can go there and what kind of businesses or whatever. Or on the other hand, it may be another layer, as I think you said, another layer of administration that has to get either created or a new job function that gets added to someone who's already doing a full-time job. So, I think there's opportunity here. I just don't know if we have the taste for it. But I think avoiding the conversation or not having the conversation isn't prudent either. I think at a bare minimum, we ought to at least hash it out and give it some consideration. I don't know if any of you folks have any thoughts on this, or if you're opposed to it. I'm okay with being opposed to it, but I think it's worth a conversation.
Town self-insured is a liability.
I believe the Woburn field you're talking about, that, those advertising funds go to that specific Little League.
To the league itself?
Yeah.
Okay.
They help them.
So they, the
part of
league fund has
fundraising.
administration that oversees that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in terms of the example that you used, and I think you're trying to use it as an example, not necessarily trying to roll out that particular
Oh, yeah, no.
program, but I don't think I'm ever opposed to hearing more about a potential source of revenue. That particular example, I think there's and I wouldn't say I'd necessarily oppose it, the things I'd be concerned about is, what level of bureaucracy are you creating? Are you, gaining an income stream in one respect, but then burdening a department in another respect that ends up being counterproductive? And so, I would just say if there are specific examples that that anybody brings forward, those are worth looking at. So, never opposed to hearing that information. But that particular one, kind of flags go off in terms of, what kinds of advertising do we have to do in order to solicit those kinds of bids? What happens when we get bids that are the same? I don't know. Just to me, I get just my instincts tell me that something that looks appealing might end up being a big detriment in some way to how smoothly things run, and after all, it's for the kids to show up and be able to play and have officials there, and fields that are safe and competitive. So to try and get some information on that example, sure, why not? If there are other examples that maybe you think of, then we can hear from them too. And in terms of the Adopt an Island, I guess I'm just, to the extent that it's related, I just want to make sure that I was clear. I think it sounds as though we're doing it, and I'm not saying we shouldn't explore it. I just think that the manager ought to have some discussions with the superintendent and try and identify some specific areas that maybe these arrangements haven't already addressed, and take a look around and see if there's specific target areas where we might want to work on, as opposed to creating a program and then going out to look for places. Let's see what the need is before we look at the prospect of formalizing anything. And to me, it seems to me as though we're getting it done without that kind of formal program. But maybe as we look at it, that'll be proven untrue.
Yeah, well, the fact that this was proposed from Ms. Black, and I don't believe she's here, nor do I think, I would like to have had a number of folks maybe involved in this, or maybe signed on saying, yeah, we're involved in this, we're in favor of this kind of a program, because then I feel like, okay, well, there's a campaign about, and then we can have a substantive conversation. I don't want to discount the work or the good idea of Ms. Reynolds, but it's one individual, so I'm not sure if she represents a bunch of other folks or if she's just come up with this. I don't know. I agree that we ought to do some homework and see if there's benefits that can be derived from this, or to see what the town comes back with, what the town administration comes back with.
Board has received a letter from Jane Lyman of Comcast announcing that there are going to be changes to the standard cable package. In fact, as of this coming August 4th, that package will no longer be available, and customers that are currently subscribed to the standard cable package will begin to receive the digital starter package. She notes that the monthly price for the digital starter package is the same as customers currently pay for their standard cable package, and it includes a digital set-top box and remote or cable card for their primary TV. In addition, they'll receive new channels. This information is going out by a direct mail communication to all of the subscribers. And if they have any questions, there are numbers here in which they can call. The board has a letter from Michael Bodnar requesting to be appointed a fence viewer. And the board is being asked to consider the appointment of a fence viewer for a one-year term in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 49, Section 1. At the last meeting, the board appointed one of two fence viewers with the intention to look to appoint an additional fence viewer. The last meeting, they appointed the building inspector, Mr. Spalding.
Right, and we had asked you to see if somebody in the engineering department, to contact the engineering department and see if they...
I did do that.
I feel it'd be a good fit to have your building inspector as well as somebody from the engineering department that's accessible at Town Hall every day to be in one of these two positions. I don't know if the board has any other questions or comments on that, or a motion.
I agree with what you're saying. I don't have any problem having an individual from the town serving on the review board, but, you know, obviously, has anyone else applied for the position? I would tend to think not.
Well, based upon the board's request that that they wanted to ask me to check with the engineering division, I did talk with Anthony Pronsky, the Director of Engineering Services, who indicated a willingness to serve as a fence viewer.
You said he would?
He would, which I think...
Well, that was the understanding at the last meeting. No, I agree with that.
Allows for the public to contact, Town Hall for that purpose.
Any other questions, comments, or a motion?
I'd make a motion that we appoint, what is it, the...
Anthony Pronsky?
Anthony Pronsky, town engineer, as a fence viewer.
Second?
Motion made, second, all in favor? Unanimous?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, typically, on something like that, would ask the manager to send out a letter and thanking folks who have expressed the interest. I see that Mr. Bodner's here, so I just we'll just say thank you for the offer to assist. It's appreciated.
The board has a letter, a request actually from Mark and Kathy Costain to use the 4th of July parking lot for the purpose of conducting a fundraiser yard sale to benefit the Top Soccer on Saturday, September 17th and Sunday, September 18th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. They write to request the yard sale so that all proceeds would go to the Tops Soccer organization. Tops is a division of the Wilmington Youth Soccer, but it's specifically for children with disabilities. I did check. There's nothing at this point scheduled for either September 17th or September 18th. Typically, the board, if they are in agreement with this, would give one date. I know they're asking for two. These are fairly popular weekends. I don't know if there'll be any other requests, but it's certainly up to the board whether it be just the one date or the both dates.
Questions, comments, or motion?
Yes, I have a question. I think that's a good point that I hadn't thought of, but is there, there's still some time here. Is there a way that we can either fashion a vote for either or and ask the manager to have a conversation with the interested group and kind of give them their pick of those days, and then because they might think that one day might be a stronger day to have it than the other, and they're the first ones that come forward, so.
That sounds good.
They're asking for 2 days, and we're suggesting we want to give them one. Is that what I hear?
I thought that was a good point made by the manager, yes, that it's kind of a busy time of year, and if we were to, at this point, authorize one date that they might prefer and not, have them come back, they can get rolling before our next meeting if the board's inclined to do that.
I don't have a problem doing that. If you want to do that, it's fine.
Just a question, when you verify the dates, is it based on what the town has, or do you cross-reference with the school? Because I know we're getting back into school in session.
Yes, I contact the school department, spoke both with Mr. Ruggiero, who checks the school calendar, things like SATs or any other kind of events, and then we also check with Mr. Harrison, who checks the sports, the athletic calendar, to see if there's anything scheduled. And at this point in time, there is not anything scheduled that would require overflow parking on at that site.
I don't want to beat this horse to death. So you're saying it's a busy time, and therefore it's more prudent for us to consider offering them one of the 2 days? I guess I'm not hearing why we can't give them both.
You can do whatever you want.
Okay.
Mr.
I'm just trying to understand it, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that the board has ever, with the exception of the 4th of July festivities, has ever given an organization 2 days. That doesn't mean that they can't start doing that, and I just...
Well, would they be leaving stuff there
I
overnight?
pointed that out. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they'll be resetting up or not. It's a little unusual, but if it's the board's wish to give both days, it may very well be that nobody else will come by. And if these folks are on first, if that's the position, it doesn't bother me. I'm just making these points to the board.
Thank you.
Judy?
The one question I had, and I don't know the answer to this, and I know you said you cross-referenced, but with the farmer's market, does that finish by a certain
The
time?
farmer's market is completed by that date, and the prior weekend, we've had some discussion with the chairman. We are going to try, and we'll have a presentation to the board at the next meeting, to have a commemoration of the September 11th day. That, as you know, that'll be the 10th anniversary, and we're right now in the preliminary stage of working with the Council of Churches for an afternoon event that would commemorate the anniversary, the 10th anniversary of 9/11. Farmers Market, I believe, is completed by the 4th, and then on the next Saturday, on the 25th, is the community fair. 24th is the community fair, and the 25th is the Chamber of Commerce half marathon. So it's the calendar fills up quickly. It's a pretty popular venue.
And just to my comments earlier, Mr. Chairman, I'm all ears in terms of whether or not 1 day is sufficient or if we should go with 2, but if we decide to go 1, I'm pointing out that I think we could take a vote on that and still give them the leeway to pick a date. So, between those 2 days.
I think that's reasonable. I mean, they could always extend their hours on one given day to get a little bit more time, as another way of looking at it.
Okay, any other questions, comments, or a motion?
So how would we what language do we give to this motion? I would move that we authorize the use of the common for either September 18th or September 17th, date to be determined between the town manager and the TOPS organization as to which one is preferred for the hours of 9 to 2 for either of those 2 days. Is that a reasonable set of language?
I'll second it. I think it is. Again, I could be sold one way or another on this. I'm wondering if manager reports back to us that, geez, it was really important to have that second day. We were made aware of that at our August meeting. No other requests have come in by the August meeting. Then, if it's still beneficial to them, maybe we can take it up again. But at least, as of tonight, we can give them their preferred date and leave the door open, you know, who knows what their response is gonna be. They might have said, yeah, we did that in case it rains one day, or they might say, yeah, we really need the two. Let's, you know, at least we can leave the door open to them, and you know, if need be, we'll still have, what's our August meeting date? 15th? So we're still over a month from those dates, too, so.
The only other point I would make, and the board has considered this in the past, to not starting an event on a Sunday prior to noon in deference to the churches.
Right.
And that's the reason, I think, one of the reasons why the hours of the farmers market are what they are, 12:30 to 3:30. Most of the events that are held on a Sunday in that area don't start until noon. I know there was the WOW race, and I'm thinking that was a Sunday, and that started earlier than noon, so I'm not suggesting that there hasn't been a precedence. However, I think that may be the first one.
Yeah,
So
understanding that, I'm not inclined to add any other additional limitations other than what's in the motion, and let's see if that's going to do the trick for this organization. And if they think it won't, then we're hearing it in August again. Makes sense to people.
Sounds good. We have a motion made and second. All in favor? It's unanimous?
So as I understand it, I will contact the Costains and indicate that the board has approved their request for either Saturday or Sunday, but also to inquire as to the necessity for the 2 days and ask them for the reasons for that. And if in fact there's nobody else expressing an interest as of August, the board will take up the second day at that time.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay.
Although, given your recent comments, I think we prefer that they lean towards Saturday, given the religious services occurring Sunday morning. At least that's what I would feel.
Good. Good.
That concludes the regular business before the board, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, before we go to public comments, I just want to reiterate again that Mr. McCoy placed this on the agenda when he was the chairman, and I think it's a great thing to have on the agenda. It's not for people to stand up and try and express their own personal agendas. It's something where townspeople can come in front of this board and present a question. Maybe we can steer them in the right direction, get an answer for them at a later meeting, possibly get something on the agenda. So having said that, is there any public comment? Mr. McDonald, before you go over there, I've asked you 2 of the last 3 meetings not to go over there. You can go from that seat and say the same thing, and every week, every meeting, you just totally disrespect me and just go over there. So I've asked you just to stay at your seat. That table over there is for agenda, people that are on the agenda. If you want to go in front of the agenda, in front of the board on an agenda item, you're more than welcome to do what everybody else does. Contacts the Board of Selectmen through the manager's office and get a request to put on the agenda. So again, if you would mind just sitting in your seat like everybody else does, Mr. McDonald.
I just want to explain something.
Is there any other public comments besides Mr. McDonald?
I haven't made a minute.
Is there any other public comments?
I had a question, but I'm going to pass tonight, so I'll ask it next time, maybe.
Okay, all right. New business or committee reports?
Are you going to hear my public comment?
No, I asked you politely not to go over that you did, so I figured you didn't want to speak on public comment, so
I'll speak.
we'll go.
No, it's actually an emergency. It's an emergency issue.
Okay, Mr. McDonald.
I have a few questions, but I'll bring the emergency issue. Residents over on Andover Street are enduring heavy vibration from the quarry blasting. That's one issue, but the emergency issue is we have thousands and thousands of gallons of fuel underground at or below the water table in tanks. And my emergency concern is this vibration shaking the pipes and hurting that fuel system to get into our water table because it is right beside our well fields.
Have we had any complaints or anything about blasting going on over in that area?
I haven't heard anything recently.
If there is any complaints from residents, obviously, there's a protocol we use, maybe have,
Yes, the fire department would go over, the police department might receive complaints, but if there's blasting, you have to have a permit to do the blasting and a fire department detail if it reaches a certain threshold.
okay.
Well,
Thank
the
you.
question I had on that particular issue is, I think it would be prudent for the board to shut down that fuel system. That fuel system should never have been built there next to a well field. You saw the catastrophe that happened at the high school. and
Okay,
we don't need that.
McDonald, we've addressed that, we've
Okay.
addressed that issue.
The other
Yeah.
issue is concerning the building project. I have a question.
What building project's that?
The high school?
Mr. McDonald, you were here at last week at the high school building committee meeting, I believe. Did you address any questions there that you might have had for that? Because,
No, this is actually a new question because
okay, well,
it's extremely urgent. And the urgency is that the town needs an easement from the Baptist church, and they're spending a lot of money on designing a school without
okay,
having
Mr.
that
McDonald, I
easement.
believe we've gone over this, and I'm pretty sure that the designers will know what easements to get and what permits to get and things like that. I'm pretty sure.
Respect for the town, wouldn't you want to hear the question?
No, out of respect for the town, Mr. McDonald, we've heard a lot of your questions every single meeting, every single public meeting. This is not the forum to rehash your distaste for the new high school, and I'm not going to allow it. So any other public comments?
I had a couple other
No,
serious
no,
concerns.
Mr. McDonald, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
It's just about the town's self-insurance. I was at...
Weren't you at the finance committee meeting the other night? Did you raise a question and was it answered?
It wasn't answered, and I'd like the board to answer. From what I understand, the town is self-insured up to $100,000. They transferred funds in the amount of $350,000 to the health and life insurance. And one of the questions that was raised is, what percentage of the cost is this? And the answer was 4%. And I think if you do the mathematical calculations, it brings us about $8,750,000 for costs, which would be 100% of the cost. Now, my concern is that if we have claims and they never go over $100,000, we're paying close to $9 million for insurance, self-insuring ourselves. And it seems to me that when I ask the question, why isn't this going out for a request for proposal to have bidding on it, I was basically mocked or talked to in a condescending manner. So I'm asking this board, when we're spending close to $9 million in self-insuring ourselves up to $100,000, why isn't it going out for a request for proposal so the bids can come in and we can see if there's insurance companies that can lower our costs?
Okay, we got your question.
Let
Mr.
me
Carey.
just briefly address that. I believe Mr. McDonald was directed to speak with Mr. Hull, who administers the insurance programs on the town's behalf. But the town is self-insured for health insurance. However, it does go out for competitive bids with regard to stop-loss insurance, which handles any catastrophic losses for the town, and we have stop-loss insurance for that. There is a request for proposal process for that stop-loss insurance.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
New business committee reports.
I just want to add one
I'm all
other
set,
Yep,
thank
no,
you.
we're all good, Mr. McDonald, we're good. Yeah.
I get it, I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All set.
All set?
No committee reports. I just want to thank the residents and the 4th of July committee for putting on a great show again this year. Amazing fireworks, and thank you all for being safe. Have a good rest of the summer and be safe through July and the rest of August.
We're good. Important dates?
Concerts in the Common continue on Wednesdays through July. This next concert is a New England Swing Orchestra, and that is from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And the following Wednesday, on the 27th, the musical group is called The Groove. Would want to note that there is a community blood drive in memory of George Pratt, a longtime resident of the community, that will be held on July 27th from 2:30 to 7:30 at the Friendship Lodge on Church Street. The Police Association sponsors its Beach Day each year, and they will do so on August 4th for Wilmington residents at the town beach from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. The Hunterdon Tavern's monthly open house is August 7th, Sunday, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. We will continue with brush drop-off at the Old Main Street location on August 10th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's August 10th is a Wednesday, I believe, and then August 13th, a Saturday, from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. The board's next meeting is August 15th, and just to let you know, the next meeting of the High School Building Committee is August 18th at the Town Hall here in this room at 6:30 p.m.
Thank you. Entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining, not to return to open session.
So moved.
Second?
Motion made second, all in favor?
Right.
Unanimous? Your voice? Your voice vote.
Yes.
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 Thank you.